At 19 years old, virgin and innocent, she was forced to marry a soulless man. But destiny had a shocking revelation in store when love finally emerged. This story will move you. Tell me in the comments. Do you believe in destiny? Leave your comment and now follow this beautiful story. The night wind blew cold through the alleys of the city, carrying with it the smell of wet earth and the melancholy of a sealed fate without warning. At the top of a hill, over a house worn by time, a young woman gazed at the horizon, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Olivia was a woman of indomitable spirit, with large and expressive eyes that reflected the intensity of her emotions. Her world, until that moment, was a refuge of dreams and freedom, although shrouded in difficulties. Her father, once a prosperous merchant, faced dark times. Debts piled up like shadows on his shoulders, and creditors no longer knocked on the door with patience, but with threats. What Olivia did not know was that night, her life was being negotiated like the last piece of a cruel game. The house was silent as she descended the creaking wooden stairs, guided by the flickering light of a lantern. In the living room, her father sat at the table, his expression tense and weary. The smoke from a pipe filled the room with a woody, heavy smell. Before him, a man with a rigid posture was observing the papers on the table, his face impassive. "Ah, Father!" Olivia's voice cut through the silence like a blade. The merchant raised his tired eyes to his daughter, but could not meet her gaze for long. The stranger, on the other hand, looked directly at her. He had a face marked by life, strong features, and a cold gaze that seemed to see beyond the surface. "You must be Olivia," he said, his voice firm and devoid of any emotion. She nodded, still not understanding why the presence of that man sent a chill down her spine. There was something about him, something dark and impenetrable. Her father cleared his throat, his fingers tightening around the papers before him. "Olivia," he began hesitantly, "I have made a decision for the good of our family." Her heart raced. Her father's tone, the presence of the stranger, the papers on the table. None of it felt right. "What is happening?" Olivia crossed her arms, her instincts telling her to prepare for the worst. The unknown man then stood up slowly. His dark uniform seemed to absorb the light from the lantern. He did not need to announce who he was. Olivia knew. She had heard his name whispered in taverns and narrow streets. Ethan, the military commander. The man feared by many, respected by all. His name was a warning, a synonym for strength and brutality. "Your father owes me more than he can pay," Ethan said bluntly. I offered a solution. Olivia looked at her father, hoping for a denial, a protest, anything that would dissolve the tightness in her chest. But all she found was a look of guilt and despair. "He said that you will marry me." Time seemed to stop. Olivia blinked, trying to process those words. Her stomach turned, the room felt smaller, suffocating. "This is a joke," she laughed humorlessly, taking a step back. "Father, say this is a misunderstanding." But it wasn't. Her father's defeated expression was enough for Olivia to understand that there was no way out. Her fate had been sealed. Ethan remained still, his expression unchanged. He did not seem to care about the whirlwind of emotions unfolding before him. For him, it was just another contract fulfilled, another negotiation closed. "You will be my wife," he said, as if dictating orders to a subordinate. "And in return, your family will have its debts erased." Olivia felt her blood boil. Her heart, racing with fear, was overtaken by outrage. "And if I refuse?" she challenged, her voice slightly trembling, but full of determination. Ethan watched her for a moment as if evaluating her. Then a small smile, almost imperceptible, touched his lips. "You will not refuse." There was something in the way he said it, the absolute certainty in his tone, that made Olivia shudder. But if he thought she would accept this humiliation without fighting, he was very mistaken. She raised her chin, her eyes sparkling with anger. "I am not a bargaining chip." Ethan did not respond immediately. Instead, he walked towards her, calmly, eyes locked on hers. When he stopped just a few centimeters away, his presence was overwhelming. He leaned slightly until their faces were close enough for her to feel his breath. "Don't be naive, Olivia. In the world we live in, everyone is a bargaining chip." The silence that followed was thick, laden with tension. Ethan's gaze remained fixed on hers, challenging her to keep resisting, but Olivia did not look away. She might be scared, but she would not surrender without a fight. The merchant let out a long sigh, pressing his fingers against his temples. "Daughter, please, it's this or our ruin." Her father's words were a final blow. Olivia closed her eyes for a second, feeling a deep pain spread through her chest. It was not just her life that was at stake. It was her family's life. And no matter how much she wanted to scream, run, escape, she knew she was trapped. When she opened her eyes again, she found Ethan's gaze, the man who would soon be her husband. She took a deep breath, gathering all the courage she still had left. "So be it," she said, her voice low but firm. "But do not expect me to accept this with a smile." Ethan tilted his head slightly, as if he had expected exactly that. "Answer? I expect nothing from you, Olivia," he murmured, "except obedience." Anger burned inside her, but Olivia remained resolute. She would not allow him to destroy her. If she was destined for this marriage, then she would fight. She would fight with all her strength to not lose herself in the shadows of that man. The pact was made, the destiny drawn. And so, under the weight of promises sealed by desperation, Olivia was taken far from everything she knew, to a castle where the cold winds whispered secrets and the dark corridors hid truths that one day could change everything. She still did not know, but that forced marriage was about to reveal much more than just a new last name. The rain was falling lightly over the dark stone courtyard when Olivia stepped down from the carriage, her heart hammering against her chest. The journey to this moment had been long and silent, punctuated only by the rhythmic sound of the horses and the crushing weight of what awaited her. Before her stood an imposing stone fortress with towers that seemed to touch the cloudy sky. The structure was cold and dark, so distant from everything she knew that it felt like another world. Guards, posted at the entrance, stood firm like statues, their expressions blank, their eyes alert to any movement. It was a place of war, not of love. The coachman pulled the reins of the horses, abruptly ending the journey. Olivia hesitated before stepping down, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. But if there was one thing she had promised herself since accepting that fate, it was that she would not bend easily. She lifted her chin, gathered all the dignity she had left, and took the first step. The great door creaked open, revealing a hall illuminated only by the fire of the torches affixed to the stone walls. The smell of melted wax and metal filled the air. Servants hurried silently through the corridors, some casting curious glances at her, others avoiding eye contact altogether. At the back of the room, in front of the fireplace, stood he, Ethan, the man who was now her husband. He slowly turned around, his penetrating gaze falling upon her, as if he had been waiting for her arrival. He wore a dark, simple outfit, but his posture made it clear that power lay not in his clothing, but in the way he carried himself. Olivia felt a shiver run down her spine, but refused to show any weakness. His eyes scanned her figure from top to bottom, evaluating her with the same coldness that someone would regard a newly acquired object. "You've arrived." His voice was deep, firm, laden with something she couldn't define. Olivia narrowed her eyes, crossing her arms in front of her body. "Looks like it." There was a moment of silence, an invisible standoff between them. Ethan's gaze was intense, almost as if he were trying to decipher her. But Olivia did not back down. She would not be just a pawn in his game. He tilted his head slightly, as if that small act of rebellion intrigued him. "Are you scared?" "No," she lied. His lips curved slightly, a trace of something like amusement shining in his eyes. "Good answer," he murmured. "But you should be." The veiled threat made her heart falter for a second, but Olivia maintained her composure. "Is that the best you have to offer?" she retorted, her eyes fixed on his. For a moment, an absolute silence dominated the hall. Then, something unexpected happened. Ethan laughed, not a loud laugh, but a low, raspy sound, as if he were genuinely surprised by her audacity. "You are brave," he said, crossing his arms over his chest. "Or foolish, I haven't decided which yet." Olivia felt her blood boil. "Maybe I'm just someone who does not intend to bow her head to a man who thinks of himself as a king." This time, the spark in his eyes intensified, but his expression remained as cold as stone. "I am not a king, Olivia. I am something much worse." She felt a knot form in her throat but did not look away. "And I am not a prisoner." He tilted his head slightly, as if analyzing that statement. "Do you think you can challenge me?" Olivia clenched her fists. "I think you've noticed that I can." A thick silence settled between them. The fire in the fireplace crackled in the background, casting shadows on their faces, making that confrontation even more intense. Then Ethan stepped forward. "You might hate me, you can struggle against it, but there is a truth you need to understand, Olivia." His voice was low but firm. "In this place I am the law, and you are my wife." Her heart raced. "A signed paper doesn't mean I belong to you." His eyes darkened, and for a moment Olivia was sure he would respond with something cutting, but to her surprise, he simply watched her for a moment before turning away. "You are tired from the journey. Rest. Tomorrow, we start getting to know each other better." With that, he turned and walked toward the shadows, disappearing down the corridor without looking back. Olivia felt her knees wobble slightly. The tension that had filled the room still vibrated in the air, as if each exchanged word had left an invisible mark. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. It would not be easy. But if Ethan thought he could break her with his threatening, a presence and undeniable authority, he was very mistaken. She was not a helpless girl, and in one way or another, she would find a way to rewrite her own destiny. But deep down, one troubling question echoed in her mind. Why, even feeling so much hatred for that man, did her heart race so hard whenever he approached? The castle was a dark labyrinth of stone and silence. On her first morning as Ethan's wife, Olivia woke to the sound of firm footsteps echoing through the halls. There was no music, no laughter, no welcoming voices, just the oppressive weight of the ancient walls and the cold seeping through the tall stained glass windows where the sunlight barely managed to penetrate. The bed she had slept in was enormous, but empty. Ethan had not been there, which made her wonder if he even slept. After the tense encounter of the previous night, Olivia was sure that living beside that man would be a constant challenge. Determined to explore her new prison, she slipped a light robe over her nightdress and stepped out of the room. The corridor stretched like an endless tunnel, its walls adorned with time-worn tapestries depicting scenes of battles, fallen warriors, and victories won with blood. Olivia felt a shiver. The history of that place was imbued in those images, a legacy of war and death. She continued walking, her bare feet silent on the cold stone floor. Suddenly, a noise caught her attention. Voices. She partially concealed herself behind a column, peering toward the grand entrance hall. Down below, she saw Ethan talking to a stern-looking man. The other man was dressed in a dark cloak, and his posture was as austere as the commander himself. "The siege of the Eastern Territory is almost complete," the man was saying, keeping his tone low but firm. Ethan nodded slowly, crossing his arms over his broad chest. "Keep pressing. I want an answer by the end of the week." "They are already cornered, sir. They won't last long." Ethan's gaze remained impassive. "Do not underestimate desperate enemies. They are the most dangerous." Olivia felt a knot in her stomach. The way he talked about war, about controlling territories, as if it were just a chessboard, made her feel a wave of unease. Then, as if sensing her presence, Ethan lifted his eyes directly to where she was. The air seemed to freeze in her chest. He said nothing. He simply observed her for a moment, his gaze firm and analytical. Then he turned back to the man and ended the conversation with a nod. Olivia, in turn, felt ridiculous for having remained hidden. She was not a prisoner. Or was she? Turning on her heels, she decided to explore more of the castle before Ethan came to question her. Over the next few hours, Olivia discovered that the fortress was even more mysterious than she had imagined. Each corridor seemed to have its own secrets. Hidden passages, locked doors, deserted halls. There were almost no servants, which was strange for such a large place. Finally, she found the library. It was a majestic room, with shelves reaching from floor to ceiling, filled with old books. The smell of parchment and polished wood enveloped her, and for a moment, the oppressive feeling of the castle lessened. She ran her fingers along the spines of the books, feeling tempted to choose one. But before she could decide, she heard footsteps approaching. She turned quickly, and there he was. Ethan entered the library leisurely, his boots making a heavy sound against the marble floor. He stopped a few meters away from her, his dark eyes resting directly on hers. "You like books?" Olivia raised her chin. "And that surprises you?" He did not respond immediately. He walked to one of the shelves, running his fingers along a row of old titles. "My mother used to come here," he said, almost in a whisper. The unexpected confession took Olivia by surprise. "Your mother?" He nodded, pulling a thick, leather-bound book and holding it for a moment before returning it to its place. "She used to read to me when I was a child, before I realized that fairy tales were worthless." Olivia felt a pang in her chest. "I don't think your mother would think that way." Ethan's eyes sparkled for a brief second before his expression hardened again. She did not live long enough to prove otherwise. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with something Olivia could not name. For the first time, she saw a crack in Ethan's impenetrable armor. But before she could say anything, he looked away. "You shouldn't be wandering around the castle alone." Olivia narrowed her eyes. "Why, is there something you don't want me to discover?" A faint, humorless smile appeared on Ethan's lips. "If there is, you won't be the first to try to find out." Olivia felt a twinge of curiosity, but before she could press him further, he turned on his heel and left, leaving her alone in the library. She sighed, feeling the weight of that conversation in her chest. Ethan was a fortress surrounded by impenetrable walls, but there was something there, something he did not let anyone see. And Olivia couldn't quite say why, but she wanted to discover what lay behind those cold eyes. The castle hid secrets, but perhaps the greatest of them all was Ethan himself. The storm began in the late afternoon, with distant thunder echoing across the hills surrounding the castle. The sky quickly darkened, and the rain fell heavily, drumming against the stained glass and streaming down the steep roofs. The weather accurately reflected what Olivia felt inside, a whirlwind of emotions that she could barely comprehend. Since she arrived, everything seemed like a silent battle. Every exchanged glance with Ethan was an unspoken duel. Every word spoken carried an invisible weight. He was a tough, impenetrable man, But at the same time, there was something about him that made her want to go beyond that mask of coldness, and that irritated her. That night she couldn't sleep. The castle was a labyrinth of shadows and whispers, and the storm only made everything more sinister. She decided to leave her room, trying to ignore the chill that crept up her spine. She descended the stairs quietly, avoiding the places where the guards might see her. She already knew that nobody cared about her footsteps, no one except Ethan. It was then that she found him. He was in the main corridor, near the large balcony that overlooked the dark gardens. He wore only a light shirt and leather pants, his body relaxed but alert. The flickering torchlight highlighted the lines marked by time and battles on his face. "Are you lost?" he asked without turning, his voice low but filled with challenge. Olivia stopped, crossing her arms. "I don't need your permission to walk wherever I want." Ethan turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers with a challenging glint. "You don't need it. But it would be wise to choose carefully the places where you step." His tone ignited something within her. "So this is the game." Olivia raised her chin. "A veiled warning to keep me in line." He stepped forward, and even without touching her, his presence seemed to invade her space, stealing the air around her. "This is not a game, Olivia." She held her breath. The storm roared outside, a flash of lightning illuminating the balcony for a brief moment. The light revealed the tension between them, Ethan's eyes dark as night, Olivia's breath too rapid to disguise. "Then why does it feel so much like one?" Her voice came out in a whisper. Ethan's expression changed. Something in his gaze softened for a brief second, only to be replaced by a different gleam, something more intense, more dangerous. "Because you are not afraid of me," he murmured. Olivia felt a tingle on her skin. "Should I be?" The corners of his lips lifted slightly. "Yes." She didn't blink. She didn't move. She didn't back down. Silence stretched between them, filled with something that not even the storm could extinguish. Until, in an instant so swift, she barely had time to react, Ethan took another step, and suddenly they were too close. The warmth of his body contrasted with the chill of the night, and Olivia felt her heart race in her chest. "Do you want to know why I accepted this marriage, Olivia?" he whispered, his voice low and hoarse. She didn't respond. Not because she didn't want to, but because at that moment, everything inside her seemed to have surrendered to the magnetism of that man. "Because I thought you would be easy to bend," he continued, "that you would break in the first storm." Olivia's eyes sparkled with furious defiance. "Then you were mistaken." Ethan's fingers curled slightly at his side, as if something inside him was about to explode, and then it happened. A lightning bolt cut through the sky outside, and in the next instant, his lips were on hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It wasn't a delicate gesture. It was like fire, like war, the shock of two forces refusing to give in, but at that moment, needing each other. Olivia didn't think of pushing him away, because everything inside her screamed to reciprocate. Her hands climbed up his chest, feeling the heat under the thin shirt, and when he deepened the kiss, she found herself lost in the intensity that enveloped them both. The world disappeared, the castle, the storm, the secrets between them. Nothing else existed, until Ethan suddenly broke the kiss and took a step back. His breath was heavy, his eyes dark and laden with something Olivia couldn't define. "This shouldn't have happened," he murmured. Olivia was still trying to catch her breath, his taste still on her lips. Then why did it? Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if trying to control something within himself. When he looked at her again, his expression was different, colder. "Go back to your room, Olivia." She felt a tightness in her chest, not because of the order itself, but because of the tone. It was as if he were trying to erase what had just happened, as if it meant nothing. But Olivia knew the truth. She knew that kiss was a mistake they both made together, and that no matter how much Ethan tried to fight it, the storm between them was far from over. The days that followed the kiss in the storm were a silent battle. Olivia tried to ignore the heat she felt whenever her eyes met Ethan's. She tried to forget the taste of his lips, the way he had held her, as if there was nothing else in the world but them. But it was impossible. Ethan, for his part, had become even more distant. He avoided looking at her for too long, kept himself busy with meetings and practices in the courtyard, and when they crossed paths in the hallways, his expression was always impassive. But Olivia saw the spark behind that facade of indifference, and she was not the type to back down from a challenge. That afternoon, the tension between them reached a new limit. The fine rain pitter-pattered against the library windows as Olivia entered, seeking a moment of peace among the shelves filled with old books. But her tranquility didn't last long. She sensed his presence even before she saw him. Ethan stood before a table in the center of the room, leafing through a thick book, but it was evident that his mind was elsewhere. Olivia hesitated for a moment before approaching. "I didn't know you liked to read." He looked up, surprised by her presence. "There are many things you don't know about me," he replied, closing the book with a movement too controlled to be casual. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Then maybe it's time to find out." Ethan watched her for a long moment before crossing his arms. "You seem to have forgotten something." She tilted her head. "What?" He stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "About what happened that night." Olivia's heart raced, but she maintained her composure. "You mean the kiss you initiated?" Ethan's eyes glinted dangerously. "It was a mistake." Olivia laughed, but there was no humor in her smile. "Ah, yes, because everything in your life needs to be calculated, right? There can't be room for failures, not even for feelings." He didn't respond. And then she did something she hadn't planned. She leaned over the table between them, getting close enough to smell him. A mix of leather, wood, and something purely masculine. "The problem, Ethan, is that you feel. You just fear admitting it." His jaw clenched. For a moment, Olivia thought he would pull away. But then, something within him seemed to break. In a quick movement, Ethan reached out and pulled her toward him. Olivia let out a surprised sigh when she felt her body pressed against his. "I warned you," he murmured, his voice low, laden with contained desire. Olivia looked at him, her heart racing, and I ignored it. The kiss happened without hesitation. This time, there was no resistance, no uncertainty. It was fire. It was redemption. Ethan's hands slid to her waist, pulling her even closer, while Olivia's fingers ran up the back of his neck, feeling the tension in his muscles. He lifted her onto the table effortlessly, deepening the kiss with a need that made all the air in the room disappear. The library, the books, the world. Everything vanished. There were only the two of them, and the certainty that no matter how much they tried to deny it, they were lost in each other. Later, when night fell, Olivia still felt her skin tingle from Ethan's touch. But fate still had another provocation in store for that night. The storm had returned, and a power outage plunged the castle into darkness. Olivia, who was in her room, lit a candle and stepped into the hallway, looking for a servant who could help her find more light. And it was then that, turning the corner, she came face to face with Ethan. He was holding a lantern, the weak light illuminating his stern features. "Lost again?" he asked, his voice tinged with irony. Olivia raised the candle. "It's not me wandering the castle in the middle of the night." His eyes sparkled. "You always have an answer, don't you?" She smiled. "Someone has to stand up to the great commander." Ethan approached slowly, the flickering light of the lantern casting shadows on the sharp contours of his face. "You'd like to test the limits, Olivia, and you'd like to pretend you don't care." The silence that followed was charged with electricity. Then, without warning, Ethan reached out and ran his fingers across her face, a touch so unexpectedly gentle that it made Olivia catch her breath. "Go to your room," he said, but his voice was different, rougher, more hesitant. Olivia didn't move. "Make me." The muscle in his jaw tensed. "You don't know what you're getting into." Olivia looked up at him, defiant. "And do you know?" The answer came in an instant. Ethan's lips met hers with urgency, a kiss stolen by the darkness, by the storm raging outside. This time, he didn't stop. This time, there were no words, just fire, and a desire neither of them could deny any longer. Dawn brought a strange silence to the castle. The rain had ceased, and the mist spread over the fields around like an ethereal veil. Olivia woke up, feeling the weight of what had happened the night before. The heat of Ethan's touch was still on her skin. The taste of the kiss still lingered on her lips. But what tormented her the most was what came next. Distance, indifference. It was as if, after each intense closeness, Ethan would withdraw even further, as if he were fighting against something he didn't want to admit, and Olivia was tired of this game. She quickly dressed and went down to the courtyard, determined to occupy her mind. If Ethan wanted to pretend nothing was happening, then she would pretend too, but fate seemed determined not to give her a break. Training in the courtyard had already begun when Olivia arrived. Soldiers were scattered across the open space, practicing sword and spear strikes under the supervision of the captains. The sound of metal clashing against metal filled the air, mixed with shouted orders and the weight of military discipline. And, in the center of it all, was he, Ethan. He wore a light tunic and dark pants, his body agile and powerful as he wielded the sword with lethal precision. Each strike was calculated, each movement demonstrating years of experience in battles. Olivia watched from a distance, fascinated despite herself. He looked like a predator training for the hunt. But then, a thought took hold of her. If that man would be her husband, if that castle would be her home, then she could no longer continue being just a spectator. Olivia took a deep breath and stepped forward. The soldiers ceased their movements as they saw her approach. Curious gazes fell upon her, some with surprise, others with amusement. Ethan turned slowly, wiping the sweat from his forehead with his forearm. "Lost again?" he asked, his voice laced with irony. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "I want to learn." He blinked, as if unsure he had heard correctly. "What?" She crossed her arms. "I want to learn to defend myself, to use a sword, a dagger, whatever is necessary." The soldiers murmured among themselves, some chuckling quietly, but Olivia held her gaze firm. Ethan watched her for a long moment. Then, without warning, he threw a sword to her. Olivia barely had time to react. She caught the weapon, but the weight of the steel made her arms waver for a second. She heard some muffled laughter, but ignored it. Ethan stepped forward, his eyes shining with something dangerous. "If you want to learn, then let's see what you know." And he attacked. Olivia almost stumbled as she dodged the first strike. The blade passed just inches from her, and her heart raced. "Are you kidding me?" she gasped, gripping the sword more firmly. Ethan gave a sideways smile. "I never joke." Another strike. This time she managed to block, but Ethan's strength was overwhelming. The impact resonated through her arms, but Olivia refused to back down. The tension grew in the air. Each strike, each dodge, each clash of blades heightened the invisible electricity between them. And then, in a swift motion, Ethan disarmed. Her, Olivia's sword fell to the ground with a metallic thud. Before she could react, he pushed her against one of the columns in the courtyard, pinning her there with his body. "You're stubborn," he murmured, breathless. Olivia looked at him, her chest rising and falling quickly. "And you're a coward." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" She didn't back down. "You kiss me. You touch me. But the next day you pretend." Nothing happened. His face darkened. "Do you think this is easy for me?" Olivia felt her heart race. "Yes, if you stop running away." The silence between them was crushing. Ethan's breath was heavy, and Olivia felt the heat of his body against hers. Then, with an unexpected move, he stepped back. He picked up the sword that had fallen to the ground, tossed it back to her, and turned his back. "The training is over." And he left without looking back. Olivia stood there, the sword in her hands and her heart pounding in her chest. Ethan was giving in, but he was still clinging to the chains of his past, and she was beginning to understand that to break that wall, she would need to go far beyond sharp words and challenges. She would need to find what he was trying so hard to hide, and when she did, perhaps he would never be the same again. The castle was in turmoil that night. The previously dark and silent halls now shimmered with the light of golden candelabras, reflecting in the ornate mirrors. Musicians played refined melodies, while guests moved through the environment in luxurious outfits, wine glasses raised in silent toasts. The reception in honor of Ethan's military achievements was a grand event, and Olivia felt like a misplaced piece on this board of appearances. She wore a dark blue dress, the silk elegantly embracing her form, yet she couldn't feel comfortable. Her gaze scanned the crowd, searching for a particular figure, and then she saw him. Ethan was at the center of attention, as always. He wore an impeccable suit, his imposing posture radiating power. But what troubled Olivia the most wasn't the magnetism he exuded. It was the fact that he seemed not to notice her presence. Since the training in the courtyard, he had avoided her even more, as if every glance, every touch, every spark between them was something he needed to destroy before it took on unmanageable proportions. And Olivia was tired of this game. She decided that if Ethan could pretend she didn't exist, then she would do the same. And that's how it all began. "Allow me to say that this night has become even more beautiful with your presence." The male voice was polished, full of charm. Olivia looked up and found a tall man with an easy smile and sharp eyes. "Is that a rehearsed compliment?" She raised an eyebrow, holding a glass of wine. Caleb laughed, leaning slightly. "Just the truth. My name is Caleb," Olivia smiled, accepting the hand he offered her. "Olivia." "Ah, yes, the commander's wife." Caleb assessed her with interest. "I confess I expected a pale and silent lady, but I see I have been surprised." Olivia let out a laugh. "And why did you think that?" Caleb took a sip of wine, his eyes fixed on hers. "Because a man like Ethan wouldn't choose a woman who challenged him." She felt a pang in her chest, but concealed it. Perhaps he didn't choose. Caleb's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Then tell me, if you could choose, would you have accepted this marriage?" Olivia opened her mouth to respond, but an overwhelming presence emerged beside her before she could say anything. The silence among the guests was palpable. Just by the weight of Ethan's gaze, the room seemed to shrink. He was there, beside her, his body rigid as steel. The black eyes were no longer impassive. They were burning. "Caleb," his voice came, out like muffled thunder. "You shouldn't be bothering my wife." Caleb smiled, calm, but there was something provocative in his gaze. "Just a friendly conversation, Commander. Your wife has a sharp mind, quite engaging, I must say." Olivia saw Ethan's fingers clench by his side. The air between them grew heavy. "If you are smart, Caleb, you will know when to withdraw." Ethan said, his voice firm, without needing to raise his tone. Caleb hesitated for a second, as if considering the risk of provoking once again, but then he smiled. "Good night, Olivia. I hope to see you again." With that, he made a subtle bow and walked away. Olivia barely had time to breathe before she was pulled by the wrist. Ethan dragged her out of the hall, passing through the castle corridors without saying a word. Olivia broke free as soon as they reached one of the terraces, the cold night wind making her dress flutter. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. Ethan turned, his gaze a contained storm. "What were you thinking?" Olivia crossed her arms. "Talking, something you seem unable to do without turning it into a battlefield." He stepped closer, his steps firm. "He was flirting with you." "And?" The word came out before Olivia could keep it in, and Ethan's gaze darkened. "Further, do you want to test my patience? I want to test how far you are capable of hiding the obvious." He moved even closer, the tension between them vibrating in the air. "And what would be the obvious, Olivia?" She held his gaze, her anger, mixed with something deeper, more dangerous. "That you want me." The silence that followed was crushing. The wind blew strongly, but Ethan did not move. He just stood there, staring at her, as if trying to decide whether to kiss her or walk away forever. Then finally he gave in. The kiss was different from all the others. It was possessive, it was furious, it was the confession he refused to say in words. Olivia felt his hands grip her waist firmly, pulling her against his strong body. She clung to his shirt, feeling the heat, the desire, the desperation. Ethan kissed her like a starving man, as if he finally accepted what he had been denying for so long. When they pulled away, both were panting. His eyes were burning. "You are mine," Ethan murmured, his voice hoarse and filled with emotion. Olivia felt a shiver run down her spine. She could respond with arrogance. She could provoke him even more, but for the first time, she didn't want to play. "Yes," she whispered, her hand resting on his chest. Ethan's heart was racing, but Olivia knew that wasn't enough yet, because wanting was not the same as loving. And if Ethan couldn't break the chains holding him to the past, then, no matter how intense this passion was, they were destined for disaster. The night was quiet, but inside the castle, the silence was filled with unspoken things. After the intense kiss on the terrace, Olivia felt her heart pounding like a drum, each step echoing down the hallway as Ethan guided her without letting go of her hand. His touch was warm, firm, but there was something different about it. It was not just desire, it was something deeper. He said nothing as he led her to the great hall where the fireplace crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. As soon as they arrived, Ethan released her hand, but Olivia remained where she was, watching him. He walked to the fireplace and turned his back to her, as if gathering the courage to say something that had long been trapped in his chest. Olivia crossed her arms, waiting. "Say what you want to say, Ethan." He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the flames. "I have spent my whole life not allowing anyone to get close." Olivia furrowed her brow, but did not interrupt. Ethan slowly turned to face her, his expression burdened with a weight she had never seen before. "You think I am a cold man? Cruel?" She hesitated but nodded. "You are." He let out a low, humorless laugh, running a hand through his hair. "I had to be." Olivia took a step forward. "Because you had to be, or because you chose to be?" His eyes sparkled with something indecipherable. "Because it was the only way to survive." The confession came as a whisper laden with pain. Olivia felt a tightness in her chest. She knew Ethan carried secrets, but she never imagined he would reveal them this way without pressure or demands. He continued, "When I was young, I quickly learned that weakness was a death sentence, that trusting someone meant giving that person the power to destroy you." Olivia narrowed her eyes. "Who destroyed you, Ethan?" He looked away for a moment before taking a deep breath. "My own father." Olivia felt a shock of surprise. "What did he do?" Ethan let out a heavy sigh. "He taught me that love is a weapon, something that can be used against you when you least expect it." There was a dense silence between them. Olivia watched Ethan, seeing a man who hid behind an iron armor, to avoid feeling pain, to avoid being hurt again. And no matter how much he tried to deny it, she knew that wall was beginning to crumble. Slowly she approached him. He tensed, but did not move when she reached out and gently touched his cheek. "I am not your enemy, Ethan." His eyes met hers, and in that moment, Olivia realized something. He was afraid, not of her, but of what she did to him. "You are the only one capable of destroying everything I have built." His voice came out low, laden with contained desperation. Olivia felt her heart tighten. "I do not want to destroy you," she whispered. "I want to know you." Ethan held her face between his hands, his touch firm but at the same time hesitant. "What if I am not who you expect?" Olivia smiled faintly. "I never expected anything from you, Ethan." He stood still for a moment. Then, without warning, his lips touched hers, but this time the kiss was not a duel, it was not a war, it was a surrender. Ethan's lips moved over hers with a different intensity, as if for the first time he were allowing someone to touch him, not just out of desire, but out of need. Olivia wrapped her arms around his neck, feeling his heart race against hers. And it was there in the warmth of the fireplace that Olivia realized something. Ethan was trying to learn how to love, and perhaps, just perhaps, he was willing to try with her. The following days were different. There was no more distance, no more silence heavy with denial. Ethan no longer fled from Olivia. On the contrary, he seemed increasingly present, watching her with an intensity that made her shiver. But something was still pending. No matter how many barriers they had crossed, their marriage was still an obligation, an agreement sealed by debts and not by choice, and that bothered her. Olivia didn't want to be a signed contract. She wanted to be desired for who she was. And if Ethan wanted something real, he would have to prove it. The main hall was majestically decorated that night. The torches illuminated the high ceiling, reflecting off the crystal chandeliers. The imposing columns seemed to guard ancient secrets as the guests moved elegantly, conversing in hushed tones. Olivia was dressed in a crimson dress, the silk flowing down her body as if it had been made for her, but her attention was not on the party. It was on him, Ethan. He wore an imposing black suit, his presence radiating power and authority. But when his eyes met Olivia's from across the hall, something in them shone in a different way. There was a promise there, something about to change. The murmur among the guests spread as Ethan went to the center of the hall. Everyone went silent, and then he spoke. "Tonight I want to correct a mistake." Olivia furrowed her brow, feeling her heart race. His eyes were fixed on hers. "Our marriage was sealed by duty. It was imposed by circumstances. But that is no longer enough." A buzz ran through the hall. Olivia felt her breath caught in her chest. "Olivia." His voice became softer, more intimate. "I don't want you to be mine out of obligation." Her heart raced. And then Ethan did something no one expected. He knelt down. Olivia gasped for breath. The guests gasped in surprise, but all she saw was him, kneeling before her. "I want you to be my wife because you choose to be, because you want me as much as I want you." The world seemed to dissolve. Olivia felt tears welling up in her eyes. Ethan extended a ring to her, not a symbol of power, but a gesture of sincerity. She knew that man wouldn't kneel for anyone, and yet he was there, before her, choosing her. Olivia swallowed hard, her voice trembling. Yes, the word echoed through the hall, and when Ethan stood up and kissed her before everyone, Olivia knew they had finally found something that no pact could define. Something real, something that no wall could impede. The castle has never been so lit. After the night Ethan knelt and asked Olivia to marry him, something inside her changed. She was no longer just the wife imposed by a pact. Now she was the chosen woman, and that made everything different. The following days were filled with a new dynamic between them. Olivia noticed that Ethan was allowing himself to feel. Gradually, the stern commander who kept the world at bay began to show another side. Small gestures, touches that were once hesitant, now came naturally. She could sense when his eyes followed her around the room, when his hands held hers for an extra moment longer than necessary. But the biggest shock came on the night Ethan broke his greatest barrier. They were in his room. There was no hurry. There was no urgency. The fireplace crackled, casting a golden light over his skin, highlighting the strong contours of his face. Ethan watched her in silence, as if trying to memorize every detail. Olivia felt a chill run down her spine, not of fear, but of anticipation. He reached out and touched her face with a tenderness that made her catch her breath. "I've never wanted anything like I want you," he confessed, his voice hoarse, laden with raw emotion. Olivia felt her chest tighten, then stop fighting it. His eyes sparkled with something profound. "I've already stopped." Then he kissed her. It was a kiss unlike any other. There was no hurry, there was no desperation. Just a man who finally accepted he belonged to someone, and a woman who knew that from that moment on she would never be the same. The days passed like a light breeze after that. The castle, once cold and austere, seemed more alive. Olivia smiled more. Ethan allowed the moments between them to be lighter, less suffocated by the weight of the past. But it was on a regular morning, while Olivia was strolling through the gardens, that everything changed once again. A sudden dizziness made her stop. She grasped the stone railing, trying to breathe deeply. She felt something different inside her, a suspicion she refused to ignore. And then, in that moment, she realized. Her heart raced. She placed her hand on her belly, and a hesitant smile formed on her lips. There was a new life inside her. Dinner that night was different. Olivia was restless, her hands sweaty as she looked at Ethan from across the table. He noticed. "What's wrong?" His voice carried a trace of concern. Olivia took a deep breath. Then, with a shy smile, she held his hand across the table. "Ethan, we're going to have a baby." His eyes widened slightly. For a moment, he said nothing. Olivia felt her heart race. Did he not want it? Did it scare him? But then something happened. Ethan's expression changed. Slowly, as if processing the information, a genuine smile appeared on his lips. He held her hand more firmly, intertwining his fingers with hers. "A baby." His voice came out low, almost reverent. Olivia nodded, her eyes misty, and then, for the first time since they married, Ethan did something unexpected. He laughed. A light, hoarse laugh, filled with a joy he never allowed to show, and Olivia knew in that moment that they had won. The barriers, the past, the fears. Nothing else mattered. They were a family now, and nothing would ever separate them. The days that followed were of a kind of happiness that Olivia never imagined possible. She and Ethan had found a balance, a silent understanding that went beyond words. His dark past still hovered over the castle, but for the first time, Olivia felt that the love they shared was strong enough to overcome anything, or so she thought, because happiness never comes without a price, and theirs was about to be paid. That night, the wind was blowing hard, howling through the stone corridors of the castle. Olivia was in her room, sitting in front of the mirror, gently caressing the belly where a future was growing. She was about to get up when she heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. The door burst open. Caleb, the Duke who had flirted with her at the military reception, was there, his eyes shining with something dangerous. "I always knew this day would come," he murmured, closing the door behind him. Olivia's stomach turned. "What are you doing here?" Caleb stepped forward, the cold smile on his face. "I came to correct a mistake." She rose slowly, her pulse quickening. "I don't know what you're talking about." The Duke's eyes narrowed. "Oh, you do, your dear husband, the unshakable commander. Do you think you know him?" Olivia didn't answer. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Caleb leaned slightly, his tone venomous. "Ethan killed his own father to take his place." Olivia's world stopped. She blinked, trying to process those words. That can't be true." Caleb let out a low laugh. "Ask him. Ask how his own blood's body was found with a blade lodged in its chest. And ask who held that blade." Olivia felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. "You're lying." "Am I?" Caleb crossed his arms. "Then why did he never tell you?" Olivia could not breathe. It was a lie. It had to be. But deep down, something inside her screamed, because it made sense. The shadows in Ethan's eyes, the fear of getting attached, the words he could never bring himself to say. If this were true, if he had been capable of this. Olivia turned and ran down the hallway. She needed to hear it from his mouth. The thunder tore through the sky as Olivia entered the library. Ethan was there, alone, with his back to the door, staring at the flames in the fireplace. "And tell me it's not true." Her voice broke the silence. He turned slowly. Their eyes met. And at that moment, Olivia knew it wasn't a lie. She stumbled a step back. "You..." The pain in her voice broke something inside him. "I had no choice, Olivia." "There's always a choice," she shouted, tears burning her eyes. Ethan walked toward her, but Olivia took a step back. He stopped. The expression on his face was that of a broken man. "If I hadn't killed him, he would have killed me." Olivia's heart pounded against her ribs. "He was your father." "He was not a father," Ethan answered, his voice heavy with something dark. "He was a tyrant, a monster." Olivia pressed her hand against her belly. "You should have told me." Ethan's face twisted in pain. "I couldn't." She shook her head. "You couldn't, or you didn't want to." His silence was the answer. Olivia felt a knot tighten in her throat. She loved this man. But now, she didn't know if she could continue beside him. The storm raged all night. Olivia stayed locked, in her room, trying to process everything, but there was no easy answer. And then when the first ray of sun appeared on the horizon, she knew. Ethan's past did not change what she felt for him. He wasn't a monster. He was a man who had to survive his own hell. And if he was willing to fight for her, then she would fight for him too. When Olivia descended to the Great Hall, she found Ethan standing there as if he were waiting for her decision. He said nothing. He just looked at her. And Olivia did what she never thought she would do. She crossed the hall and took his face in her hands. "I can't change your past, Ethan." His eyes were full of fear. "But I can be your future." Ethan's breathing trembled, and then he embraced her. The truth had been exposed. But contrary to what he feared, Olivia did not run away. She stayed. Because in the end, true love is not about perfection. It is about accepting the flaws, the mistakes, and the scars. And that is exactly what Olivia did, because despite everything, Ethan was hers, and now, more than ever, she was his. Forever. The sun was rising over the golden fields surrounding the castle, spreading a soft light over the landscape that, for so long, had been nothing but a backdrop of war and isolation. But now, for the first time, that place carried a new meaning. Olivia was standing on the balcony of the room, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The wind played with her hair, and a strange sense of peace enveloped her. It was hard to believe everything that had happened, hard to believe that after so much fear, so many struggles and secrets, they had found a way together. But fate had not been merciful to them. It had been cruel, relentless, testing them in every possible way, and yet they were there, strong, together. She lowered her eyes to her belly and gently caressed her still small stomach. A smile softened her lips. There was a life growing inside her. The future that had seemed uncertain for so long was now unfolding clearly, but the journey to that point had not been easy. The castle had never been a home for Ethan. Until Olivia arrived, those cold and lonely corridors had been nothing but a refuge, a place where he could hide from the past and avoid the future. Now, everything was different. He watched her from the door of the room, saying nothing, just recording that image in his mind. Olivia bathed in the morning light, her eyes shining with a kind of serene happiness he never thought he could provide to someone. She felt his presence before seeing him and turned slowly. "You've been awake for a long time," she said softly. Ethan approached, standing beside her. "Long enough to realize that I never get tired of looking at you." Olivia smiled and rested, her head against his shoulder. "Not everything has been easy for us, has it?" He let out a low sigh. "No." A comfortable silence settled between them. Then Ethan looked at her and, with surprising care, placed his hand on her belly. "I never thought I would have this," he murmured. Olivia held his hand and intertwined her fingers with his. "Neither did I." He was silent for a moment before letting out a low laugh. "Do you still trust me?" Olivia looked at him, surprised. "Of course. After everything you found out?" She nodded without hesitation. "The past doesn't define who you are now, Ethan. The man you were is not the man standing before me today." Ethan lowered his eyes to her hands on his and took a deep breath. "I spent so long carrying the fear that if anyone knew who I really was, they would abandon me." Olivia raised her hand to his face, forcing him to look into her eyes. "I will never abandon you." Her voice was firm, filled with certainty, and for the first time, Ethan believed. The days passed slowly, and the presence of the baby became more and more real. The castle's doctors examined her regularly, and Ethan made it a point to be present whenever possible. But at the same time, a new threat loomed over them. The first warning came with a letter. A messenger brought the sealed parchment, and Ethan opened it with steady hands, his eyes hardening as he read the words inscribed there. Olivia was by his side and felt a chill at the change in his expression. "What is it?" she asked anxiously. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment before handing the letter to her. Olivia took the parchment and started to read. The words were direct. "The blood of a king must never be spilled without consequence. You've paid your debt to the past, Ethan, but now it's time to settle accounts with the future. Get ready. We are coming." Olivia felt her heart stop for a second. She raised her eyes to Ethan, her breath caught. "This is a threat." He nodded, his face serious. "Yes." She closed her eyes, trying to calm the wave of fear rising up her spine. "Who are they?" Ethan hesitated before answering. "Men loyal to my father. People who never accepted what I did." Olivia felt a knot form in her stomach. And what does that mean? Ethan held her face with both hands, his eyes dark. It means I will protect you and our son at any cost. The following days were filled with preparation. The castle was on high alert. Guards patrolled the corridors every hour, and Ethan stayed close to Olivia. But then, on the quietest night of all, the attack came. They arrived without warning, scaling the castle walls, moving like shadows in the dark. Olivia woke up to the sound of swords clashing, screams echoing through the courtyard. She quickly sat up, her heart racing. "Ethan!" He entered the room at the same moment, sword in hand. "I'm here!" Olivia ran to him and he held her tight, his eyes dark and calculating. "We need to get out of here, now." She nodded, trusting him without hesitation. They left through the corridors, avoiding confrontations. The castle that had once been a place of solitude was now a battlefield. But Ethan fought like the warrior he was. Each enemy who stood between him and Olivia fell without hesitation. And then finally they reached the back gate. The guards loyal to Ethan opened the way, and he pulled Olivia outside to a horse that was already prepared. "Let's go." Olivia mounted the horse, and Ethan climbed behind her, holding her firmly. And without looking back, they left. They spent weeks on the run. They took refuge in a distant village, hidden from enemy eyes. And there, in that simplicity, they found something precious, a home. They no longer needed a castle to rule. They didn't need a throne to validate who they were. And it was there, in that village, that Olivia finally gave birth. The babies. A cry filled the small room. Olivia held the child against her chest, tears streaming down her face. Ethan was by her side, looking at the son as if he had just touched something sacred. He reached out and touched the baby's cheek with a trembling finger. "He is so small." Olivia smiled. "But he already has your gaze." Ethan chuckled softly. And then, for the first time since everything began, he knew. It didn't matter where they were. It didn't matter the past they carried. Because, as long as they had each other, they would be home. And that was all that mattered. If this story touched your heart, if you were moved by the journey of Olivia and Ethan, leave your comment below. I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that love can overcome even the darkest secrets of the past?